So you've watched the video on body language and body expressions, and you've watched the video, I hope, on facial expressions. So now let's take a look at eye expressions. The famous quote that eyes are the window to the soul is incredibly true. If you look at a person, the first thing you're going to look at is their eyes. We all look at each other's eyes, whether it's a person or even if you're looking at an animal, you look at a cat or a dog, immediately eye contact is the thing. So it's very important that we get the eyes right and that we spend more time and energy on getting the eyes correct than any other part of the anatomy. Now, eyes are incredibly expressive, and they are, of course, connected directly to the brain. And this is the bit that the audience is going to pay attention to, the character's eyes. Here are some eye expressions taken from The Illusion of Life, the great book, which I highly recommend you get. These are taken from some of the Disney characters over the years, and there are endless variations that we can get on eye expressions. You can see just from this sheet here just how many different variations there are, and we know that these are angry eyes. These are sort of sleepy or confused, astonishment, maybe kind of depressed or anxious or worried. This looks like a very heavy blink or an anticipation for surprise, and here's surprise here in these eyes. And if you think about it, there are an awful lot of characters that have no mouths at all. This is the wonderful telephone from Toy Story 3, and there's absolutely no articulation in this mouth here. Everything that the animator is doing has to be conveyed in the eye expressions. So I highly recommend you watch some of the footage of that and see what an amazing job they did, letting the eyes carry all of the expressions in the performance. Gromit as well is another character. He's got no mouth. He's just he's just eyes. That's all the animators have to work with. But again, they managed to make the eyes incredibly expressive. And check out Gromit's animation. It's really, really amazingly well done. You can get an awful lot of expression out of eyelids. If you pull the upper lids down, you get a kind of sleepy look. If you pull the lower lid up, you can get a lot of expression there. And when I was working on the movie Robots, one of the problems that we had with the eyes on the robots was that if you animated them like this with the eyes in the middle of the eyeballs in the middle of the pupil, they had a sort of vague or blank look. This was fine when the eyeballs contacted the edge of the eye socket. That looked fine. But as soon as you brought the upper lids down, the characters looked kind of sleepy. And the solution was this, to bring the lower lids up slightly. Here's the same thing shown slightly more clearly. The problem here is you get these blank eyes. Like this they look fine, like this they look sleepy, and so here is our solution, was to pull up the lower lids. And you can see, if you look at publicity photos for robots, you'll see a lot of this use of lower lids in order to create a more attractive eye expression. Changes of eye direction, very, very important. A common mistake is to animate a character looking from left to right without a blink. You can, if you want, have the character have the eyes kind of move along like this, but it's much better to add a blink. Generally speaking, as a general rule, if there's a change of eye direction, if a character looks from one direction to another, you should add a blink. If you don't add a blink, you better have a good reason for it. Because it's a very common error not to add blinks, and it looks very weird. Try it yourself, just as you're watching this video. Try looking from one side of the room to the other, and you will find that you naturally blink, and it's a natural form of editing process that goes on in your brain. You just want to look from position A to position B, and you don't want to see all the points in between, because it's confusing for your brain. So there are a number of different kinds of blinks. You can have a light blink, a heavy blink. You can even have a half blink. If you watch dogs, they tend to only half blink. And one important thing to get right is that if you're going to animate a blink, you want to animate the brows as well. Nothing that looks weirder than the lids on a character closing, but no motion in the brows. So you should you should always have brows and lids working in unison. I would say a minimum of 6 frames for a blink. Here's a sort of rough timing for a blink. I would say a minimum of 6 frames, but typically I'd make it a little bit longer so you really feel it, say 9 or 10 frames, and have it closed for a couple of frames, and then you really read the in-betweens and you'll make it nice and clear. Here's an exaggerated blink, or at least the eyelashes are very exaggerated. This is taken from the animator's survival kit, and you can see here kind of overlapping action on these eyelashes as it comes up. And as you're bringing the pupil down in a blink, it's often nice to bring, instead of just having the eyelid cover up the pupil, have the eyelid lead the pupil down, and then as the eye opens again, it will lead the pupil up again. That's a nice detail that will give your blinks texture. You can also offset the timing on each eye by 1 frame, so when you're animating a character blinking, they don't have to blink at exactly the same timing. If you just have a 1 frame offset, you'll give the character a little bit of texture. Here's a blink taken from Toy Story, and Woody looks from one side of the screen to another and his eyes are offset by 1 frame. Eye darts, very, very important. If you watch people talking on the telephone, their eyes will be kind of darting around. They're looking around, they're thinking, and these little micro darts often just last a couple of frames, or the travelling time is just a frame or 2. Then they might stay in the pose for 8 to 10 frames. But you want the little eye darts to be very, very quick, very, very rapid. And animators call these eye darts because your eyes are kind of darting around while you're thinking, and also while you're looking. Here's a scene that I animated from Robots, where Rodney is looking out at a crowd and his eyes are kind of darting from side to side because his head isn't turning, but his eyes are just scanning the crowd. And part of the reason for this is that you want to keep eyes alive. All CG tends to look dead if we let it go still. You always want to keep things slightly in motion, and it's especially true of eyes and faces. You want to keep the eyes moving, and that keeps the character alive. Here's some lovely eyebrows taken from an advert for Tic Tacs that my father did back in the 1970s. He's got these kind of crazy expressive eyes going on, and never forget that eyebrows can be just as expressive as eyes. So really this lecture should be on eyes and brows because they tend to work together in unison. Maintaining clear eye direction is incredibly important. Bad eye direction will let down your work. And in theory, most rigs have an automatic direction mover which will allow you to steer the eyes in the correct direction. But you usually will have to fine-tune these because they often don't work very well. So make sure that when you're animating a shot, especially if you have 2 characters, that those characters are always looking at each other. If you go to the theatre and you watch performers on a stage, you will find that actors look at each other. They hang on to each other's eyes. And that's one of the most important things in stage acting because it creates a bond between the characters and it holds the audience's attention. If you have the eyes of your characters wandering around the screen, it lets down your work and the audience will get distracted. So you must make sure that your characters are looking at each other at all times. So that's a general introduction to eyes. Make sure you watch the other videos on facial expressions and body gestures too for a complete picture.